So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gitte Ørskær. I'm the director of Modern Museet. And it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to this magnificent afternoon, where we'll meet two magnificent people, namely our curator Henrik Folkerts and the magnificent Miss Davis. This exhibition has been planned for 2 years. And to see it alive today for the public is just a magnificent experience. The exhibition is not only here at Modern Museet, because she's too big for us. So we are also having exhibitions at National Museum, at Index, at Accelerator, and later on at Tensta-Kunsthall at MDT, our neighbor here at Skeppsholmen. I don't know what I expect from today's talk, but I know that if you go and see this magnificent catalogue, this is trying to grasp the world or the cosmos of Miss Davis. And I've actually been through it now, and I'm still curious about her. I learned a lot, but what I know is that there's no direct line when it comes to Miss Davis. So I'm sure what we will be witnessing now is the magnificent Henrik Folkerts, who will try to keep Miss Davis on track. So please welcome Henrik Folkerts and Miss Vaginal Davis on stage. Welcome.
Very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with Vaginal Davis. As Gitte has been saying, we have been celebrating this week, celebrating the fruition and opening of the exhibition Vaginal Davis Magnificent Product, which celebrates and shows over 40 years of work by this legendary woman next to me, Vaginal Davis, who was born and raised in Los Angeles, moved to Berlin around 2004-05, has since then been a very active member of the Cheap Art Collective, and who is known in many guises, as a writer, as an artist, as a performer, musician, as an activist, as a visual artist, as a filmmaker. Miss Davis has done so many things. We are not going to be able to share everything, but we will try, and we have, in this exhibition that takes place here at Moderna Museet and 5 other institutions in Stockholm, because it was very important to consider what type of exhibition model we needed to show an artist of this magnitude. And it became very clear that we didn't want, nor could we, do it by ourselves. So I am grateful to all the other institutions and people here in Stockholm that we have been working with. But also, people is the operative word here. And that's a little bit how I want to make my way to an aspect of this magnificent product that maybe we haven't gone so much in depth on, which is this book, which is the sort of English version you see here, and the Swedish version is simply on the other side. So we're going to talk a little bit about some things that are featured in this really great book, which of course is available in our bookshop as well, should you want to have a look after this exhibition, after this interview. And one of my favorite sort of sections in the book, Miss Davis, welcome again.
You know what, sweetie? You know what, sweetie pie?
Tell me, Miss Davis.
We need this fan
Yes,
on.
we need it on. Yes, we do.
Oh, can it just be like only on me? A little closer. Because I get overheated. Heat rises, and I'm very tall, even though I'm sitting down. Thank you, thank you. Oh, give a big applause to Elva, my makeup artist, expert today. It's really hard to make me look pretty. Very hard, and she did an amazing job of it. Thank you, Elva. Thank you, darling.
Thank you, Elva. You have done an incredible job for the last 4 days with us. Thank you so much. Back to the book. You feel good?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. Back to the book. One of my favorite sections in the book is Mary Magdalene, which is in fact a novel that you have been working on for a really long time. It is an autobiographical novel of sorts, but it also is about your mother in so many ways. So as a way into this book, tell us a little bit about Mary Magdalene.
Well, I'm a little excrement for brains today because of all the activity. I've been here in wonderful, gorgeous Stockholm now for 3 weeks. And from the moment I arrived on April 28th, and it was dark, and it was cloudy, and it was rainy, I started the next day, on Monday, at the National Museum, the beautiful National Museum, working on the exhibition there. And 8 o'clock in the morning, because I'm a morning person, I get up every day at 5 a.m. Isn't that insane? But that's just how my body fluctuates. And so we were there at 8 o'clock, the crew, Jonathan Berger, Richard Gabriel, Eva-Lena, Carl, all the wonderful people, Victoria, everyone was there, and they were just so happy to get up that early and start the adventure with me in the National Museum. And we were there from 8 o'clock to 5:30 or so. And the security guards had to always kick us out because everybody just wanted to stay. And it was wonderful. And then the sun came out on that Monday, and it's never gone away. The sun has just stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed, you know? And it's been gloriously beautiful. You know, the weather here, it's a little too warm for me. I didn't expect that, you know, because it can get really hot and humid in Berlin. But I didn't think, everyone told me in Stockholm, if it does get hot, it doesn't get that hot. And for the last 3 weeks, it has been boiling. But I guess you're closer to the sun, so the rays are more penetrative. And because of the environment, because the catastrophe of our environment and, you know, mankind not being good caretakers of the planet, disaster will suddenly one day, oh, it's already happening, befall us all. So, you know, that's another point to think about. But we've just been working and working. I've been constantly working. And so you must, I'm giving a disclaimer now that you must forgive me because, you know, my brain, I'm 63 years old and I kind of have junior Alzheimer's already. So sometimes my mind goes and there's no retrieving things once it starts to, you know, travel in these realms. So I'm just asking your forgiveness and patience with me as a little tiny 5'2", eyes of blue, elderly black lady from the inner city of Los Angeles. But thank you for your patience. But Mary Magdalene is the autobiographical novel that is about me and my mother and my sisters. I grew up in an all-feminine household with me and my sisters. There were no men allowed. It was a lesbian separatist household, you know. Lesbian visibility, lesbian visibility. Chant the mantra, chant the mantra, chant the mantra. Lesbian visibility, lesbian visibility. And so, you know, my upbringing was a little bit unorthodox, to say the least. Wouldn't you say?
I would say.
Yes, it was a little bit unorthodox because I never saw men in my life. And when I did see them, there were these strange creatures. And I was actually afraid of them. And their deep voices and whatnot, it was just completely foreign to me, just completely foreign. And with my my book that I've been working on now for the past maybe 25 years, it's about me, it's about my life, but it's also about my mother, Mary Magdalene de Plantier, or Maria Magdalena de Plantier, because she's a black French Creole woman from Louisiana. And then the family left Louisiana from New Orleans and moved to Colfax, Louisiana, and then from there, Shreveport, Louisiana, where it was very multicultural there at that time in the early part of the last century, because my mother was born in 1919. Yes. So she had me in her 40s. And back then, women didn't really have children that late in life, but I was the last one. But this novel is about my mother's life, her mother too, Mama Sarah, who was a full-bred Choctaw Indian woman who lived and grew up on a reservation. So I have Choctaw indigenous roots and also Black French Creole roots on my matriarchal side of the family. So I come from a line of witchy-poos, hexen women. And I think that's one of the reasons, another fellow witch here, over here, woo, yes. And I think that's why I have this sort of like second, third, and fourth sight. And that's why it was so pivotal to have my eyes watching and looking out as the opening salvo to the exhibition Magnificent Product. These eyes, the eyes of Doctora T.J. What's the character in the Great Gatsby? Dr. T.J. You know,
Need some help here. Who knows the character?
Dr. T.J.
No
one's read The Great Gatsby? Oh my God. I can't remember. I blanked out. I can't remember the name of those all-seeing eyes in the Great Gatsby. You know, and I wanted that image, and that was an image that I felt needed to sort of lure people in to the exhibit. And it seems to be working because I didn't think anybody was going to come to the opening yesterday because of the pop star Taylor Dayne taking over the city, you know. Oh, no, her name isn't Taylor Dayne. What?
Swift.
Oh, I'm sorry. Taylor Swift. That, you know, she builds economies and whatnot because of her mainstream popularity. So I really didn't think people were going to come and they were just going to, you know, go to the Taylor Swift concerto and not come here.
But they did.
But they did. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
But I am
I'm
curious,
just
Miss Davis, to ask you that when you talked about your mother, Mary Magdalene, you would often say that she was the real artist.
Yes. I'm the fake artist. My mother, Mary Magdalene's the real artist because a lot of the techniques and the things that I do and how I make things, it all comes from my mother. It all comes from her, using feminine household products as the basis of the art, painting with feminine products, using makeup, eyeliner, mascara, lipstick, eyeshadows, lacquers, nail lacquers, nail polish, those kinds of things. That's what my mother did. But the difference between me and my mother is she would make art objects, paintings, things that you would call today in the art world, quote unquote, assemblages and whatnot. She would make something, she would display it in her home or give it as a gift to people, blah, blah, blah. But most of the things that she had displayed in our home, living in the projects in Los Angeles, she would destroy after a while. She never kept anything. So maybe there are some of the gifts that she gave out there to someone, but everything else she destroyed. Poof, gone. And my things have managed to, not all of them, mind you, but some have managed to survive the things that I've done in the last 40 years because of others who saw fit to keep the zines, the flyers, because I would work on a project and then I would move on to the next thing and I'd forget about whatever I did before. So it's a major miracle that the Moderna was able to, this sleuth, this Nancy Drew, was able to go throughout the world and finding people who I'd given gifts to and whatnot and drag it back here. So it's like a testament to your skills and Isabella of Index, because she put on that Miss Marple hat. She was all out Agatha Christie. And what's the character, Jessica Fletcher? You know, all out Murder, Jessica. Murder, She Wrote. And she wrote it again and again and again because Isabella went to Los Angeles kind of naively, just like you. She went to Los Angeles and she found a cheap motel to stay in and not realizing it's like one of the worst neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Dangerous, but the goddesses were looking down upon her. Goddess Freya was looking down upon her. And she was saved by the bell many times. And in those investigations and her investigative work and research, she, just by chance, met people who knew me and had things of mine. Serendipitous.
Miss Davis, this was an exhibition to risk one's life for.
Exactly.
So, you know.
And you went to one of my old apartments.
Yes.
I used to live in the early 1980s. I lived in this apartment called the Karnak. It was an Egyptian. No? It was my first apartment after moving out of my mother's house. And it was in the old section of Hollywood. It was an Egyptian pylon facade because in the 20s they built all these Egyptian motifs because they discovered King Tut's tomb. And so this apartment was wonderful. And there was a series of these Egyptian-style apartments built by Paramount Pictures in the 1920s to house their junior stars. And the legend was Louise Brooks actually lived in the apartment that I lived in. But I don't believe that. Because I've read every book on Louise Brooks, and there's never been a mention of that. So that's just Hollywood lore, you know. But you're an art historian, so maybe you know, or you're not a film historian, you're an art historian. But Marcusa Siegelson, my colleague in Cheap Collective, he's a film historian. Did Louise Brooks live in my apartment, Marcusa?
No.
Oh, okay, there you have it. For the record, from a historian, a film historian who's taught at the Goethe Universitat, you know, with Marcusa, with the other Marcusa, Herbert Marcuse, and Adorno. But you weren't exactly alive at the same time with Marcusa and Adorno, were you?
I didn't study with them.
Oh, okay, sweetie pie. Yeah, so I lived at this apartment building in the early 80s, and what was I talking about?
How I nearly got killed.
Oh, you were tracing back all the apartments that I lived in Los Angeles, and you were taking pictures of the facade, and it's a beautiful apartment, too. And some man came out there and saw you, and he said, Beelzebub! Mephistopheles! Yes, and he was talking about you. Satan, Lucifer, devil man. Yeah, and then you just became very, very Dutch. And you said, you were like going to ignore him, and the way you kind of ignore people sometimes, you know, you were like... And you thought maybe he would stop calling you Beelzebub and maybe move on with his life. But no, he didn't. And he was getting more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive. And then this Hendrik can run because he bolted. And the man was following you. Well, tell them the story.
Well, he kept following me. And, you know, because I was at this facade, and it was really because, you know, we'll talk about more of them, but when Miss Davis talks about her time in Los Angeles, it's often very situated in sort of the apartments and sort of the neighborhoods that she lived in. So in order to make this exhibition, it was actually quite important to see those spaces as well as I and we could. And so it was this, beautiful sort of apartment. I was taking a few pictures, and this young man comes out of this sort of apartment, and he talks a little bit to himself. I'm like, oh, that's normal there, you know, so whatever. So, and he starts to say, the devil. I was like, oh, well, that's a bit strange. And then he starts to say, the devil is taking a photograph of my house. I'm like, oh, he means me. Okay. And then he starts to follow me, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to slowly just walk away from this, you know. And then he starts saying, I need to stab the devil. I need to kill the devil. I was like, okay, start walking a little faster. And Los Angeles, I mean, you've told me this many times, it's a city where things come out of the blue, and you really can't get out of that situation because there's no one on the street, especially if you're walking. And so, I ran for my life. But I made it. And I made my way to your other apartment on Sunset, the Villa Rosa, which is this beautiful apartment where you started to run HAG Gallery. Can you talk a little bit about HAG? Subtle, no?
Well, yes. From mid-Hollywood to the Sunset Strip, HAG is the only apartment where I had the HAG Gallery at the La Villa Rosa, 7850 Sunset Boulevard. That's where I first started for the LaToya Jackson magazine and some other zines that I did. And it was a beautiful apartment, the only apartment on the Sunset Strip, right near where a lot of the sex workers would congregate. The famous Divine Brown, Hugh Grant was right there where my apartment was, or is, because it's still there. And it's been there since the 1920s, La Villa Rosa. And, I lost my thought again.
HAG.
Oh, we're talking about HAG. HAG Gallery.
How you started HAG in Villa Rosa? Yeah.
Yes, at the Villa Rosa, I started the HAG Gallery, and I wanted to do a gallery because I felt like I wasn't ever meeting any boys that wanted to be, you know, lovers with me or be husband to me or take me out. I was just like, I was dorky and nerdy, and boys just didn't see me that way. I just wasn't sexy enough, you know, at that time. I was just too, my interests were all too esoteric for boys back then. And so I thought, well, how can I, and I wasn't a big, heavy drinker, so I didn't really like going to bars. And at that time, at gay bars, they certainly wouldn't let someone that looked like me in the gay bar, because if you're feminine appearing or actually a woman, back in those days in Los Angeles, which is a very segregated city on so many levels, they wouldn't want you in the bar, so they'd have all these crazy rules like no open-toed shoes in a warm city like Los Angeles. 3 picture IDs. Who carries 3 picture IDs? All these kind of misogynist-like things, you know. It was hateful, you know. But so I thought that if I did my own art gallery and have openings every 6 weeks, I'd have these fabulous parties, because I learned to throw parties from the legendary Elsa Maxwell, who did parties in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and early 60s. And I would have different artists showing their work in my gallery, and I would meet someone who would want to form a relationship with me, you know. That was my strategy. But whenever I strategize anything, it always backfires and it never works. So everyone, all my lesbiana friends, my lesbian friends, queer gay male friends, my straight friends, my trans friends. Everyone met a significant other except me. And that was the main purpose I did the gallery, was to get a date. I just wanted a date. But at this time, no one was doing really home galleries at that time. It became very popular later in the early 90s. And I'm sure there's been other places where there have been home galleries, but I didn't know about that. But the gallery became very, very popular, and it was written about. I didn't even know what Art Forum magazine was until they wrote about my gallery. I had never even heard of Art Forum because I didn't even consider myself an artist. I was the first one in my family to go to university, but I didn't study art. I was an English major, and I minored in philosophy. That's why I knew a little bit of German, because if you're going to take any philosophy, you have to have a prerequisite in Deutsch, even though my language skills are really horrible. But what were you saying?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned so much by already how many sort of artists you showed as part of HAG, but also how, in that sort of apartment space, you made, your incredibly beautiful and famous zine, Fertile Latoya Jackson, which allows me to make a little bit of a sort of a bridge to the book again, because the designer of the book is Jeffrey Hilbert, who did an incredible job. Please give him an applause. He's in the audience.
I wanted someone to design the book. I didn't want a regular book designer. I don't believe in that. I wanted someone who had never designed a book before, and someone from my world, from the zine world, because Jeffrey had an incredible, incredible zine called Sin Brothers Magazine. And he also started doing a series of incredible clubs, starting with Sit and Spin, and then going on to another club that was even more successful than Sit and Spin, Trade. It was housed in a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard, owned by Sylvester Stallone's brother and Dolph Lundgren, called Black and Blue, the restaurant. And oh my God, so this club, all the West Hollywood normative homosexuals would come, all the Silver Lake queer identified people would come, straight people would come, movie stars. It was a real hodgepodge. All the lesbians came, and for crowds mixing in this way, that back then, it was right, Jeffrey, it was really, really novel, And Jeffrey paid the most for having he always cared first in paying his performers. That was the most paramount thing with Jeffrey and his clubs. He always made sure that us performers were paid really, really well. And at that time, when I was doing performances at Jeffrey's club, Trade, I was working at my day job where I was. Can you imagine me working for a regular, more corporate environment like UCLA, where I went to school at UCLA? Working for UCLA, I worked at the Placement and Career Planning Center. My boss was Bill Locklear, Heather Locklear, the actress's father, and he was a wonderful boss. Oh my God, he was great. I worked for him at UCLA's Placement and Career Planning Center in the building designed by Frank Gehry, and I had the corner office, which was great because all the most cutest boys kept walking by my window distracting me.
Am I right in thinking that you split that job with Ron Athey?
No.
That's something.
No. That's the LA Weekly job, and that was much later after I left UCLA. Yeah, I'd always worked and wrote for the LA Weekly when I was still a teenager. In those days, alternative weeklies were really alternative, and everyone who worked for the LA Weekly were all people in the punk scene. But then later, corporate interests came and took over alternative weeklies throughout the cities in America, and they became these corporate co-opted things, and they just kind of went downhill. But Ron, with his tattoos on his faces, he was the assistant to the editor at the Weekly for about 20 years. And he went through several editors there, and Ron Athey, the performance artist, was the assistant to all of them. Editors came and went, editors-in-chief, but Ron was always there. God, I've talked so much, my voice is just like shot.
No, it's fine.
Forgive me.
I mean, all these threads that Ms. Davis is so beautifully spinning for us is also sort of drawing out a world, of course, at the time, which is the world of sort of homocore and sort of queercore. I mean, these words are somewhat sort of interchangeable, which was, you know, the name of a scene that was in various cities, but that Miss Davis was, you know, one of the figures at the heart of in Los Angeles. It was a scene in which zines, like fanzines, that's where that sort of stems from, was really important. Not just to kind of, you know, spread things and have a medium for it, but also for different scenes in different cities to be sort of aware of each other. It was really sort of a network thing. And that's why, just to bring us back to sort of the book and sort of the design, it was so great that sort of Jeffrey came on board as the designer to bring that aesthetic into the book as well.
Because it needed to be someone from that scene to design it. And it was wonderful of Hendrik and his boss to like agree with that, and because most other institutions would never have someone design a book who had never designed a book before, you know? And Jeffrey has mad skills, and I wanted the world to see it. And I'm so happy with the book, and I'm so proud of it, you know?
And Ms. Davis, maybe just to stick a little bit kind of in this scene, this was also the time that you started to organize Club Sucker, right? A little bit later in the 90s. A little bit
Club
later.
Sucker started with me and Frank Rodriguez, whose day job was at Sony Pictures. He worked at Sony Pictures. And Jeffrey Hilbert also worked at Sony Pictures. They worked for Tim Palin, a.k.a. Daddy Dino, who now is a big executive with, I think, Lionsgate, is it? And he did all the Twilight movies and blah, blah, blah. But we started, and Dale Johnson, Frank Rodriguez, and Jeffrey, and Crepe Suzette, who's a big costume designer for Hollywood movies. She was our first door girl. And that club started in 1994 to 1999, and it was an afternoon club at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 10 or 11, because when we first started the club, I was still working a day job at UCLA, so I couldn't stay out that late. And you can't stay out so late anyway in Los Angeles because everything closes at 2. And here, things close at 1, the bars.
1, 2, very early.
I didn't expect that in Europe, that things would close at that early. But Los Angeles is an early town, except for after-hours places. But, oh, God, I lost my thought again.
Club Sucker.
Oh, Club Sucker. Yes. Club Sucker. Yes, so it was from 3 in the afternoon to around 10 or 11 o'clock. And I needed to get to work the next morning at 8. You know, and I wake up at 5 in the morning, so that's not so hard, you know. So that's why it was at these unusual hours, and that gave us the ability to break the rules. And you know, like you're not supposed to go inside a bar unless you're over 21. You can be drafted into the military, but you can't drink in the United States, which is like really ridiculous. But I broke all those rules, and I allowed underage people to come into the club, and there was lots of nudity. No one can show this anti-breastage thing in the United States is ridiculous. So if a woman wants to be on stage and perform topless, she has to cover her nipples with some kind of tape or something. And it's like, chant the mantra. Women need to be able to bare their breasts in public if they want. You know, I'm sick of that. So, you know, you can take off your shirt any place, at any time, anywhere. But a woman, to the side of a nipple. Oh my God, that dangerous nipple! Get it out of my face. It's like, it's ridiculous, you know? But at my club, you didn't have to put the tape over your nipples. And my club had a lot of great all-women bands performing, and all queer women bands performing, because this was the Riot Girl scene was raging. And actually, the all-women bands were the reason why my club had such longevity and lasted for 5 years, because you can't count on the gay men to support you unless there's hot guys there that they want to have sex with. But the women were always there every week. And in Los Angeles, everybody's a heavy drinker. And oh my God, it was so much fun. Like people like Ellen DeGeneres and whatever lover she had at that time, she would bring her whole entourage there. And the lesbians and all the women, really, they're the ones that made my club. And this goes back kind of like to the early days of punk rock in LA. People don't realize historically, those early days of punk rock, the main focus of the punk rock scene, or the leaders of the punk rock scene, were first the women, the queers, the trans, like the legendary great Jane County was an early punk rocker. She didn't live in Los Angeles. She was in New York, but she's one of the godmothers, the foremothers of the punk rock scene. You know, there were tons of other trans women. It was the gorgeous lesbians that were at the forefront of the punk rock scene, like Frank, the Jewish lesbian folk singer, who was in early Los Angeles punk bands like Catholic Discipline and Castration Squad. That's my favorite band, Castration Squad. They were wonderful. And Alice Bagg was in that scene, and Alice is queer.
Carla Duplantier.
And Carla, my own cousin, she was in one of the earliest of the punk bands, the drummer of the Controllers. So it's like, you know, the early scene was very queer focused. It was very female driven and focused. It was very art centered. It wasn't until 78 or 79 that it became this male boys club thing. You know, someone's going to die tonight, oi, oi, oi. It didn't become that until around 78 or 79 with the boys club. And then everyone who was queer and the women were like not comfortable in the scene. And then that's when all these rumblings started to happen, and which produced queercore. And a lot of us in the queercore scene in LA, it was a very small, even smaller than the first 100 punk scene. It was the people that were part of the emerging queercore scene in Los Angeles. But we made it seem in our zines that we were throngs and mighty masses because we used hyperbole. And in our zines, we acted like it was a gigantic scene, you know. But it really was very small. And then GB Jones, who's the lesbian leader, she and Carolyn Azar of the all-girl band Fifth Column in Toronto, they were doing the zine. She started the zine JD's with Bruce LaBruce. But GB Jones, she was doing movies way before Bruce LaBruce. Bruce LaBruce was the go-go dancer for the Fifth Column. And she was the first one doing the movies, not Bruce. And you know, but of course, the history, the revisionist history, has everything about Bruce and not about GB Jones. She gets neglected in the historical, and I have to correct that as best as I can. I have to make corrections, you know. And Bruce is great. We're collaborators too and friends. But I first met GB Jones because GB Jones and I were corresponding with each other many years before we actually met in person. And she was the first one I was corresponding because we write these letters, 25-page long, 30-page handwritten letters, still doing letters, and I still do letters, handwritten letters via post, no emailing for me. I do email, but it's about letter writing. It's really about letter writing. And in those days, 25-page letters back and forth with ephemera, with drawings, with paintings, with art objects, all stuffed in these envelopes that were decorated to death, let me tell you. Mail art was so much fun back in those days. And I still do it. I haven't stopped. But I was corresponding with GB, and then Bruce got jealous, and then he wanted to correspond with me. But we didn't all meet each other until 1990 with SPEW, which is the Homographic Convergence in Chicago in 1990 at Randolph Street Gallery, when all these queer zine people and activists and back in those days, you didn't just do a zine, you also had an art band. It went hand in hand, and also making movies. All that went hand in hand back in those days. I'm getting all excited.
No, it's very nice. But I mean, Spew is such an important moment in Chicago, and there's footage as well of those moments that happened there. But I've always been like curious to ask you, like, if you've been writing to each other for such a long time, and you've been reading the zines, and you've been, sort of aware of each other, how was it actually to see each other in real life all of a sudden?
My God. At the Homographic Convergence Spew at Randolph Street Gallery, it was great.
This was organized by Steve Lafreniere.
Steve Lafreniere organized that with a woman named, God, my mind is slipping. It's like, I can't remember her name right now. It'll come to me. But, and also Hudson, the great gallerist, later became a great gallerist. Hudson was one of the organizers. Steve Lafreniere, the performance artist Larry Steger, Joanna Brown, who later did Homocore with Mark Freitas in Chicago. And they started the Homographic Convergence, the first queer zine festival, and then other ones sprouted all over the place afterward. There was the second one in Los Angeles, then one in New York, then one in Toronto, then one in London. Just kept continuing with the zine world. And back in those days, there wasn't really desktop publishing. So we made our zines by hand with scissors, cutting, what's it called? Rubber cement. Does anyone you're all too young to even know what rubber cement is, right? You don't know what it is. You're a millennial. You don't know. But we would just cut and paste and glue things down. I wrote all the articles on my 1920s Royal typewriter. I had a 1920s portable typewriter, Royal typewriter, and I typed all the articles on that. At my day job at UCLA, I used the Xerox machine to make the captions, the headlines, and to enlarge or shrink, blah, blah, blah. That's how we did it back then. Some people went to Kinko's. You don't even know what Kinko's is? We went to Kinko's. But I was fortunate. I had, it was like having a grant. I worked at UCLA, so I had access to really the most technologically joint Xerox machines. And though I'm not very technical myself, so I had to learn how to use the Xerox machine and do the collating, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that was really hard. And it didn't staple. So you had to have stapling parties with your friends to put the zine together, like an assembly line. And but those days were so much fun. And because the zine wasn't distributed like a regular magazine. It was just through word of mouth. And at first, when I did the zine, I didn't charge any money. I just gave it away at my Afro Sisters shows. And when I did spoken word events and through parties and clubs, I just gave it away. But then one of my Afro Sisters, she owned a punk rock store on Melrose called Retail Slut, with the motto, "It's better being a retail slut than a wholesale slut." And she said, "Oh, you should sell this magazine. People would buy it." I said, "No one's going to buy a magazine that's Xerox." And she said, "Just put a price on it. I bet people would buy it." And so I said, okay. So I put an outrageous price. I think the first price was maybe $1.50 or $2. I don't know. It was outrageous. And then she kept it in the store on the counter, and they were all gone in a week. In a week, all the magazines were gone. I said, "Oh, my God, that's insane. A Xerox publication?" But it looked so different. It got people's attention, And so then, as an experiment, back in those days in the 80s, Los Angeles had some of the most amazing bookstores. Oh, my God. There were these stores that you buy your books and they would wrap it in this sort of brown butcher paper and then wrap it again in twine. Do you remember that? Did you have that here in Stockholm with bookstores and antiquarian bookstores? And I've always been a bookstore person. And there was one bookstore called the George Sand Bookstore. And I love this bookstore. It was wonderful. It was like where Melrose Avenue ends at Santa Monica Boulevard, right before Beverly Hills in West Hollywood. And I went there with some copies of Fertile Latoya Jackson magazine, and I put them in with the regular magazines just to see if regular normative people would even notice it. And I stood back and was just browsing, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a very trendy restaurant right across the street from the bookstore. And someone from that bookstore came in, and they were getting some things and shopping. And then they went through the magazines. They were picking up the mainstream magazine. And then they saw my magazine. And they picked it up and they looked at it and kind of laughed at the cover. And then they put it down and they went about doing other things, blah, blah, blah. And then they came back and picked it up again and then started thumbing through it and laughing. And then they put it back and then they went to something else. Then they came back and then they went up to the cash register with their other purchases and were going to buy it. And I was like, oh my God, is this person going to really buy it? And then the cashier was like, oh, it's not in the computer. But he just like rung it up. And this real normative kind of businessy man, and it was a man too, he bought my magazine.
Fertile Latoya Jackson.
And I said, oh my God, and he's a normal person. my magazine. I couldn't believe it. And I stuck around just to see if other people would buy it. And so I was like, just in the bookstore. And then several other people came in and they were looking at magazines and books and, and in those days you could stay in bookstores all day long and just camp out there. And it was a couple. It was like a very, those kinds of couples that come from very good families, those kind. And in Germany we call them the Bildungsbürgerlich types of people, And they're very, very posh, blah, 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 dressed really well, but boring clothes, very nice, expensive clothes, but kind of dull. And they were looking at things, and they picked it up, and they were both laughing and looking at it with each other, and then going back and forth, and like, oh. And with their other purchases, they bought it. And I was like, oh my God. And so then I think about a few weeks later, I left the bookstore. I stopped doing my spy thing. I left the bookstore, and then I went, because I had the telephone number in the masthead of the magazine, and someone called me from the George Sand bookstore and said, we ran out of the magazine Fertile Latoya Jackson, and it says here that these are the offices. And because it said Fertile Latoya Jackson Magazine, 7850 Sunset Boulevard, penthouse suite. When I lived on the first floor. And it wasn't a penthouse, it was like a bed-sit apartment, so it didn't even have a kitchen. It was just a one big room with a bathroom and no kitchen, just a hot plate. And I said, oh yeah, I can come in and bring some more. I was like, ooh. And so then I had to, of course, Xerox some more at work because I had the keys, so I could go into the office of the Frank Gehry building and Xerox some more. And then I did, and I brought them, and then the guy that owned it, he was really, really sweet. And like we were chit-chatting and talking, blah, blah, blah. And he was about, I guess about 32 or 33 years of age. And we became really good friends. And then he came to one of my Hag Gallery openings, and he met a lady, a very pretty young lady, and they got married. So I'm always matchmaking everybody else, but I can never get anyone for myself. It's just like, but them are the breaks. Them are the breaks. But of course I got sidetracked, as I always do. Sorry, Hendrik.
It's okay. I have no desire to keep you on track, so this is good. But it is really beautiful to see also, in a lot of the materials that is in the exhibition downstairs, we're seeing a lot of flyers from that time. We're seeing the zines, of course, which are at Index. We're seeing so much of the energy of that time, but also the video sort of documentation in part of the last Club Soccer in 1999, because it ran for 5 years, right, from 1994 to 1999. And so much of what you're describing, I mean, the zine making, but also the female-led kind of sort of enterprise, went into sort of Club Soccer as well, as you've shared. But maybe I'm making my way to a few years ahead, which is this other beautiful sort of event that features on our big archival wall in the exhibition downstairs, is a Platinum Oasis, which you organized with Ron Athey, right? Mm-hmm. that was something. That really looked like a massive event. How did it come to be?
Platinum Oasis, Ron and I, in 1999, we decided that we wanted to do a performance art club. And I had Club Sucker at the Garage was my sort of, I called it the punk rock beer busty and old English tea dance. And it had ended after 5 years. And then I decided that, me and Ron were talking and we said, well, we should do a performance art club. And there was a sushi restaurant in Silver Lake called Zen Sushi. And we were pretty friendly with the owners, the Japanese, elderly Japanese couple that owned it. And we said, we want to do, on your slowest night, we want to do a club here, like just a once a month sort of thing. And they were completely game, really into it. And so we did this club called GIMP Unlimited. And it lasted for about maybe a year and a half or almost 2 years. And Shari Freelo, who is the lesbian head curator, well, no, I don't think she calls herself a curator. She's more of a film programmer, Shari Freelo. She was one of the founders of the Mix Festival in New York, the experimental queer film festival. And she was working for Outfest. And also the Sundance Film Festival as the head programmer for the New Frontier section. And Shari wanted to create a new section in Outfest, which was the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival in Los Angeles. And since she comes from an experimental film background, she wanted an event to sort of encapsulate this new program within a mainstream gay and lesbian film festival. Because, at that time, most gay and lesbian film festivals just sort of, were all about the market of sensitive coming out stories, and they weren't so into, they really weren't so into experimental works, So she wanted to devise this new experimental section to the mainstream, more normative gay and lesbian film festival in Los Angeles at the Directors Guild. And so she wanted me and she came to GIMP with Kathy Opie and Catherine Opie, and she loved what she saw, and she said, Ron and Miss Davis are the perfect ones to put together an event to highlight this new section of the festival. And me and Ron, we came up with the ideal of doing a sort of endurance festivals. And we wanted to have it at a gay bathhouse, because I believe in like a lot of gay places, have gay sex places. I think that the dynamic needs to be changed in having women be involved in gay sexual spaces, because it makes it a little bit more interesting than just horn-doggity gay men, So we approached a lot of gay bathhouses to like have an event there, and it made them very disturbed, the thought of that, because there was like a sort of gay retreat place in West Hollywood, and the production person at Outfest had approached them because they already have naked events there of gay men, and she thought, they'll be game for this, and they were not. And I had mentioned to the production person at Outfest, what about the Coral Sands Motel? And she poo-pooed it because, it was this sleazy, it was known as a fist fuck motel, And she kind of poo-pooed it, and she had her heart set on getting the place in West Hollywood. But then the place of West Hollywood was not being, even though it was under the auspices of Outfest and whatnot, and they just were not having, because they didn't want women and men mixing sexually at any level, and that was just a complete no-no for them. And so, I like breaking rules, and even with the Cheap Collective, our fearless leader, Susanna Zaza, she led protests with all these great, wonderful women in Berlin in sort of coming in there and disrupting the homo sex places that have dark rooms. We want to have sex in the dark room, and we want to have it now. So all these women came into the gay men's sex dens of inequity and are demanding to have sex in the dark rooms. And the gay man said, no, you can't have sex in the gay dark room. This is for men, and you can't come in. And they said, we're coming in anyway! And they did. They took over the dark rooms. And it did, you know, the men were a little like, but, you know, the girls were having sex with each other, blah, blah, blah. Some men even participated and had sex with the girls, but, you know, most really didn't. They just, you know, it's not going to disturb them by having some girls having sex too, you know. And I know now there's like all the controversies because all of the bachelorette parties go to gay bars and blah, blah, blah. But gay bars are closing, you know, and because people just do these application things, whatever they're called, you know, to find people now. They don't even go to bars anymore, you know. And so Susanna, she marched in there with a group of women, and they just took over, you know. Well, they couldn't completely take over.
Similar, basically, how you went to the motel for, like, a
Well,
platinum.
the Fist Fuck Motel was actually owned by a straight Korean couple. They owned this Fist Fuck Motel, and they wanted to kind of give back to the gay community that supported this Fist Fuck Motel, but they wanted to do something that wasn't just only a sexual thing, you know. And because that other place, the more homonormative place, didn't want to cooperate with the coordinator at Outfest, she was forced to go back with my first ideal, Ron and I's first ideal of the Fist Fuck Motel. And the Korean straight couple were completely into it. And they gave us that motel for free on their busiest night. And we had it for 24 hours. And the first one that we did there of Platinum Oasis at the Coral Sands in Hollywood, the theme was sexual repulsives. And it became legendary. It's like, because people had always heard the stories about this Fist Fuck Motel. But of course, the more hoity-toity upscale gays, you know, would never admit to ever going there. But they were curious about it. But now they had a reason to, because it was an official art event. And we had artists from 40 artists for the 40 motel rooms from all around the world. And we had to do fundraisers to, you know, to bring some other artists within the United States. All the European artists that we invited, their countries provided the flights, gave the fees, but America doesn't give you nothing. So we did a lot of fundraising, and we did an event called Spicy Beef Curtains. And we raised all this money. Dr. Doyle, Dr. Jennifer Doyle, who teaches at, an academic who teaches at UC Riverside, she was the door person at the Spicy Beef Curtains event. And all the rich people that came there, she would not let them in unless they gave even more than the suggested donation. She knows how to talk to rich people. Let me tell you that, Dr. Jennifer Doyle. And the director of Outfits at the time, he was just like a really nice, you know, placid gay man from a good family and everything. And he was horrified that Jennifer was being so aggressive with people. He was just like sitting next to her at the door like, you know. But she got those rich people to give out that coin, you know. And so we were able to bring more artists from other parts of the country just to make it more well-rounded and whatnot. And of course, we paid everyone. They didn't get paid that much, but all 40 artists got an honorarium, you know, because that's always been really important to me, is paying people, you know. And so the first Platinum Oasis was a huge hit, and it became this, like, you know, this thing that everyone heard about, and even the ones that weren't there say that they were there. You know, one of those kind of things that just goes into, you know, a sort of mythologies built around it and whatnot. And the theme was sexual repulsives. And we had Catherine Opie, she did a room, and Magnuson did a room. So we had a mixture. Oh, thank you, darling. I'm like parched. I've been talking so much all the 3 weeks, that I've been here and meeting all the wonderful technicians and all the hard workers like Allison, the conservator here at the Moderna, and Tanya, who works there. So many people, Bruno, and all these amazing, incredible people, and hanging out with them for the what's it called? Fika? Fika! I love the concept of the fika. I love it, and hanging out with everybody, and such experts in their craft and what they do, and oh my God, it's just like I've just been having such a wonderful time. But I talk so much; it's hard to shut me up. And
have a little bit of
now
water.
I don't have. I sound like someone who smokes when I've never smoked in my life. You know.
A little bit of water, but thank you for talking a little bit about Platinum Oasis, which like legendary, like event. Which
And the second Platinum Oasis, the second year, the second year, the theme was Salute Pasolini, La Terra Vista della Luna. And we invited 40 more different artists to make rooms there. And it was a salute to Pasolini. And that one was even more successful. And it was like, oh my God, like the artist Urs Fischer, he did a room. And we had a lot of like big artists that wanted to be a part of it and whatnot. And it was just great. And we did it 2 times. And then we took a break from doing it, and some other people, well, I won't get into that. You go on.
But I mean, thanks to the amazing photography of Hector Martinez, who is sitting over there. Big applause. You'll get to see a lot of those images in the show, actually. Hector kept all of them, and one of the many friends, thanks to which we can make this show.
Well, Hector kept a lot of things that I had kind of like lost track of. I don't know how he wound up getting them, but he kept so much. So I'm really thankful to Hector for. It's like Hector is like a junior archivist of sorts, you know. So thanks to Hector that he saw the value of things that basically, you know, like a lot of my zines. I don't even have one copy of one of my zines because I just did something. I moved on to the next project, and who would have known in the '80s that something that you did, people would have an interest in it so many years. What's the '80s? 40-something years ago. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk?
I mean, of course, and one of the major things that you moved on to was a whole new city in your 40s, right? I mean, you moved from Los Angeles to
Who
Berlin.
moves from another city when you're almost 45 years old? You move to other cities when you're in your 20s and your 30s, not when you're in your 40s.
But you did.
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah, because Los Angeles was no longer a sort of hospitable space.
Los Angeles used to be the cheapest of the international cities. But things changed, and I had been at my apartment that you got to see in Koreatown. And that area, which is now Koreatown, has been Koreatown since the 70s, used to be the old Irish section of Los Angeles when we had ethnic enclaves in LA. Or around Pico and Normandy, that was the old Greek area of Los Angeles. So this neighborhood is very historical, and it's very adjacent to the super wealthy old money section of Los Angeles called Hancock Park.
Yeah, exactly.
And the woman who owned the apartment building that I lived in, she was very eccentric, and she owned a lot of properties, but to live in her apartment building, you had to be the right person with the right energy. She didn't care how much money you made. And she was a complete savior because she, for whatever reason, just liked me. And she was giving me the keys, and she said, "Do you think the rent's too high?" What landlord asks you if the rent's too high? And I'm like, oh my God, this lady is someone special. You know, because you know how advanced capitalism and danger capitalism are, you know? And so, you know, and when she liked you, she never raised the rent. So she kept the rent always way below market. And it was a huge, beautiful apartment building, an early example of streamlined modern. And I had a gorgeous terrace on a clear day. I could see all the way to Catalina Island and the beach. And from my balcony, I could see the Hollywood side of the Griffith Park Observatory. And all my European friends, when they came to Los Angeles, they had their own separate entrance because the apartment was split level. They had their own separate entrance with a bedroom with 2 walk-in closets and a built-in high heel racks. They made things really well in the 1920s in Los Angeles, you know? And a gigantic bathroom with a huge sunken princess tub and a separate shower where you could bring 5 or 6 people in that shower and have sex with them if you wanted. So all my European friends, they would come and stay with me, and I had an extra bicycle because even though I was born and raised in Los Angeles, I never learned how to drive a car. Never. And I've never had any interest of driving a car or owning a car. I've always known that cars were icky. They're icky. Yeah. And I never wanted to be a part of automobiles. And, you know, but I digress.
Well, your lady landlord, she had to
yes.
sell the apartment, and it fell
Because
into
her
your
husband
hands.
came down with Alzheimer's. And so she had to sell the apartment. And because her kids were, you know, they didn't want the responsibility of owning property and whatnot. And so she sold it to a carpetbagger. And this carpetbagger, we were all paying way below market, and he wanted us out. But all the other tenants, who were mostly all artists too, or they were disabled and had very low incomes, they were so scared of this new owner that they just took the relocation money, which was very little, and they just left because rents had started to really rise. And I'd been there for so long, I didn't know that rents had gotten so high. I didn't know at all because I always stay put usually in apartments for a long time. And so everyone else just took the relocation money and fled, but I was feeling all defiant, and my activist spirit went in, and I was like, I got all, you know, aggro. But, you know, that's one thing about going to a school like UCLA. You meet people who come from good families and have better economic situations than you. And one of my friends was a high-powered lawyer, and he says, "Oh, I'll represent you, all right." And he says that I think we could win the first round of this, but this person is going to do everything in his power because you pay so way too low below market. He's going to do everything to get you out. And you're an artist. Do you want your new job be keeping this apartment even though it's gorgeous and beautiful? And I said, I don't care about the apartment. I don't want this man getting any money from me. And so, you know, he made a deal with the carpetbagger's lawyer. So I was able to stay there for another, I think, year and a half rent-free. But then my friends, the Cheap Collective, they said, well, why don't you move here to Berlin?
Mark Siegel,
Susanna Sachs, and Daniel Hendrickson. And I never imagined myself, like most Americans, not living in the U.S. You know, I'd done little residencies in other places, you know, here and there, and I had a brief modeling thing in Paris when I was very young. But I never imagined not living where, you know, my mother lived. But at that point, my mother had died, and so, you know, and I was so close to my mother, and, you know, I couldn't really afford the rents of Los Angeles. And so, you know, and the Cheap Collective was doing a lot of things with the Berlinale Film Festival. So I had a flight to Berlin, and I left, and I didn't look back lest I turn into a pillar of salt. And it was the best decision I ever made because I could see the writing on the wall in the United States that all the institutions are falling apart, the infrastructure is falling apart, everything was falling apart. Even before that orange trophy thing came around, things were heading in disaster land. And, you know, the psychic drain of all that in the United States was just getting to me. And, you know, Berliners aren't known for being so completely warm and inviting. But in a way, I kind of like that because you walk into a store and people just ignore you. They're not following you around. Security guards aren't following you around, and people saying, "Can I help you?" every 5 seconds. You know, with that kind of fake hospitality and niceties that you have in the United States. And in Berlin, people are very straightforward. And with the Germans, if they do open themselves up to you, they're so loyal. It's like really incredible how loyal they are. They can be. It's just like, whoa, you know? They're very abrupt, and they tell it like it is. And I appreciate that, you know? Being a black person, because, you know, us black folks in the United States, a lot of the reasons why people don't like being around black people, because we tell it too much like it is, you know? We tell it on the mountaintop, don't we? And nobody wants to be around someone that they can't fool, you know? Because it's too uncomfortable. It's too uncomfortable, you know? And so I felt like, you know, I don't have a husband. I got no husband. I got no boyfriend. You know, my mother has died. You know, by that time, most of my sisters had died, except one who's 10 years older than me. What's keeping me in Los Angeles? You know, yeah, the weather is nice, but so what? You know, it's like this icky movie capital town, you know, this industry town where everybody from God knows where land comes there because they want to be stars, and they want to be famous and all that, you know? And so I said, why the hell not go to Berlin? But it was the best because I had an old contract. Susanna got me this apartment. It was an old contract, and old contracts are gold in Berlin. And I was, you know, I only paid $500 in my big apartment in Los Angeles, but in Berlin, I got an apartment from 1860, and it was only $200 a month. And that's warm costs, you know? $200 a month. Wow. In a beautiful building in the Rote Insel section of Schöneberg, you know, the part of Berlin that was never bombed at all, the old socialist part of town in West Berlin. So, you know, I packed my salty bags and I went, well, one bag actually, you know. And that's why a lot of things got lost too in the move. And I left some things at people's garages, like Ron Athey's garage, and a lot of things with Hector I left. And, you know, but I just like let go, let goddess. Sometimes you just have to let go of things and clothes and even archives of stuff I had. I said, I just let it go. But thankfully, other people kept stuff, and that's just led us here to this room in this place. Yeah. And someone, oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and someone from, like, you know, an underprivileged background, you know, being dirt poor, you know, it's like, it's miraculous. It really is. Because, you know, I don't come from privilege. I don't come from any kind of money or wealth or anything, you know. But I do feel very, very privileged because I always felt like I was a success. Whether I was performing for 2 people or, you know, 500 or 600 people, I always felt like I was successful. I didn't gauge my success by how much money I made, you know. My success was how I felt about myself in any given situation. And I convert the cosmos and bend it to my will, not the other way around, you know?
Hear, hear, truly.
I'm talking on the James Baldwin mountaintop now. Mm-hmm.
Miss Davis, I know you had such, I mean, you talked about that, such busy weeks while you were here, and we had the openings, and so of course I want to talk more about sort of the Berlin years as well, and the incredible work that you've done with sort of Ad Cheap, at like sort of Arsenale, but also sort of the concerts, and with like, you've done so much with them, which is so incredible, but also I'm mindful of the time, so maybe a shorter sort of a question then, you know, about that, because a lot of the work of sort of Cheap in this beautiful new installation you can actually see at Accelerator, so please go there, of course, and then you can learn more about them and what they do, and they've made this incredible film, and it's beautiful. But maybe, Miss Davis, like, how did it, and I'm asking this in an intentionally naive way, actually, but how did it feel to be part of an art collective?
Well, I always worked with collectives. It wasn't the first time, because in the early 80s, I worked with the Amoeba Records and Film Collective in Hollywood. Keith Gomorrah Wednesday, Holland and John Kwasi O'Shea. And the film, that Fertile Feeling that you're showing in the art version of LA Cinerama Dome, I worked with them, and they did a lot of video films with my group Cholita, the female Menudo. I made a whole bunch of like sort of little short films with them. And actually, Kwasi O'Shea, who was one of my collaborators, he actually went to film school at UC Santa Barbara with Helen Bed O'Neill, who owned the store Retail Slut, AKA she was also in the Afro Sisters as Urethra Franklin. And so they went to UC Santa Barbara, and Kwasi, he went to film school. And when we filmed that Fertile Feeling, that was like 1981 or so, 82, I think, 81 or 82. And Fertile in the video is wearing a Resist Apartheid t-shirt. That shows you how old that film is, But it didn't really get exposure until more towards the late 80s with this legendary art exhibit called Against Nature at Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions that Dennis Cooper was the curator, Hudson, and Steve Lafreniere. But we had made it in 82, and around, I think, when the gay and lesbian film festivals were first starting, Kwasi wanted to submit it to what later became Frameline, the San Francisco Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. But back then, it was just the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival in San Francisco. And I told Kwasi, don't send it to them because they're not going to like it. They're going to hate it, But Kwasi wouldn't listen to me, and he sent it them, and they were so horrified by the movie that they wrote this long, long letter saying how untalented we were, how we should never be behind the camera, and And Kwasi, having gone to film school, he was just like devastated. And I told him not to send it, So now that it's like playing here at the Moderna, it's like 40 odd years later, it's like ooh.
Eat that.
Eat that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But so, yeah, your experience of being part of an art sort of a collective goes back to,
Yeah, I like working with collectives, like working with everyone who works here at the Moderna. It's a collective, It's a collaboration. It's not just me. There's no way that I could just do everything that's in the museum, in those walls, and put all that together, because I have hardly any skills, like real technical skills. Like I can't use a power drill or a wrench or a screwdriver. I don't know how to do that. When I need to have something built, I go to my lesbiana friends. They're the ones that come over and they have every tool. My friend Cross, she built a whole deck, in Silver Lake. She built an entire deck and it was amazing. Let me tell you, it was really good. I have no skills of that. So I appreciate people who are so well-skilled, so talented, and I love hanging out with them and chit-chatting with them and finding out about their lives, because I'm nosy. I'm a real nosy black lady, So, I like to I always need details. I'm very detail-oriented. I love getting details from people about things. Sometimes I used to drive my mother crazy because she called me the little lawyer, because it was like cross-examining everyone. She was like, oh my goodness. So, and a lot of people said that I should have become a lawyer, that I have the mind for that. But no, I didn't go into that.
We're very happy that you didn't. And also, thank you for emphasizing that sort of, working with people, and being, of course, sort of interested in people, because it has, for us, led to two things here in sort of this city, is to work with other people in the city, work with all these sort of other sort of institutions, but also make a book, and maybe I'm coming full circle here, make a book that reflects the relationships that
it's all about those interpersonal relationships, those intimacies. I did a performance piece called Intimacy and Tomorrow, Stupidity Today. It's about being intimate with people. And of course I use absurdity and whimsy because I'm not a didactic, dogmatic person. I use whimsy because you have to give people, put a little sugar in the broth, you know. You'll get diabetes, but, you know, it softens things up so that people can listen sometimes to sort of like present things in a different way. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you've got to be okay with that. And then just move on. If people don't respond or whatnot, you just move on and you learn. But if you don't have these failures, I call it failuretics. And me and Jose Munoz did this whole thing in Spain one time on the concept of failuretics. You know, you have to have those failures, because if you only have successes, you don't grow from that. You got to have the failures, sweetie. You just got to. You got to. I'm conjugating my black verbs here now. Because no, even Vaginal Davis, I'm a construct. I'm a complete. There is no real me. Someone said, "Oh, be yourself." I said, "But there is no real me. What self? Be yourself." That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I'm a construct, and I'm actually very, very introverted. I have to force myself to be extrovert because, you know, I live alone. I've always lived alone, and all my adult life I've lived alone. Well, I did live for a very brief moment with Aretha Franklin. We shared an apartment one time, you know, right near the Bodhi tree in West Hollywood. Do you remember? Does anyone know the Bodhi tree? It's one of those metaphysical, pataphysical bookstores. Liza Minnelli used to go there. But I've always lived alone, and I'm actually really a loner. I'm very much a loner, which is good for the kind of art that I do, because I like to observe people, always keep a pad and pencil with me, taking down little notes, jotting things down, blah, 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 and noticing nothing escapes, as you have found out. Nothing escapes my glare. Mm-hmm. He tries to distract me a lot of times. Does he do it to you? Yeah, he's clever, this one. He is so clever. But honey, I got my spies everywhere. I have those militant lesbian feminists that are behind me, the Madame Defarges. They're in every city in the world, honey, and they're out there, the Madame Defarges, and those trans activist women. You can't get anything by them. Pass on them, honey. They're called the Fist of Diana. You can't get anything past the Fist of Diana, honey. Madame Defarges and the Fist of Diana. Lesbian feminists, Madame Defarges and the Fist of Diana.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Right, Maquette? Girls in Maquette? Right? You're there. There they are. There they are.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vaginal Davis.